The Great Council Chamber of Nexus Prime was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. Its walls stretched upward for nearly a mile, covered in the flags and symbols of 800 different civilizations. Floating platforms carried delegates from species that could not breathe the standard atmosphere. Translation devices hummed constantly, turning 1,000 different languages into something everyone could understand. For 12,000 years, this chamber had been the center of galactic politics. Wars had been ended here. Treaties had been signed. Entire species had been welcomed into the community of civilized beings, and a few had been cast out for crimes against sentient life. Today, like most days for the past 30 years, the council was discussing humanity. Ambassador Linda Morrison stood at the central speaking platform. Her silver diplomatic uniform pressed and perfect, she was a tall woman with gray streaks in her brown hair and calm blue eyes that never seemed to show anger or frustration. Behind her stood two members of her security detail, Commander Jack Sullivan and Lieutenant Katie Brooks, both wearing the dress uniforms of Earth's diplomatic corps. "Esteemed members of the council," Linda said, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic systems. "The United Earth Coalition wishes to thank the Veth Dominion for their patience in the ongoing trade negotiations. We believe that with continued discussion, we can reach an agreement that benefits both our peoples." High Arbiter Zilthik, the ancient insectoid who had led the council for 300 years, watched the human ambassador with the same puzzled interest he had shown since first contact. The Veth were a proud species, standing nearly 8 feet tall on 6 legs, hard shells that could stop most projectile weapons. They had conquered dozens of worlds before joining the council, and they were not known for their patience. Yet here was this small, soft human, thanking them for patience they had never shown. The Veth delegation had been demanding human terraforming technology for years. They had threatened trade sanctions, travel restrictions, and thinly veiled military action. The humans had responded to each threat with the same thing: polite requests for more time to consider, reasonable counteroffers. An endless patience it was, Zilthik thought. Either the greatest display of diplomatic skill he had ever seen, or the humans were simply too weak to do anything else. He suspected the latter. The Courteous delegation sat on the far side of the chamber, their reptilian bodies coiled on specially designed seating platforms. The Courteous were relatively new to the council, having joined only 800 years ago, but they had quickly earned a reputation for aggressive expansion. Their lead diplomat, Vashrak, was a scarred veteran of a dozen border wars. One of his eyes was artificial, replaced after a battle that had killed 30,000 enemy soldiers. Vashrak despised the humans, not because they had done anything to offend him personally, but because their very existence seemed like an insult to the natural order of things. The galaxy belonged to the strong. Species survived by being tougher, smarter, and more ruthless than their neighbors. These soft pink creatures with their constant smiles and reasonable words had no place among the stars. "The humans waste our time as always," Vashrak announced, his translator turning his hissing speech into standard galactic. 30 years they have been among us, and still they accomplish nothing. They talk and talk and talk. Perhaps talking is all they know how to do. A few delegates from other aggressive species made sounds of agreement. The Courteous had allies in the council, species who shared their belief that strength was the only true currency in the galaxy. "Linda," Morrison turned to face the Courteous delegation. Her smile never wavered. "Representative Vashrak raises an interesting point. Humanity does prefer discussion to conflict. We find that most problems can be solved through patient negotiation." "Patient negotiation," Vashrak repeated mockingly. "Is that what you call it when your colony ships are turned away from systems you claimed? When your merchants are taxed at triple the standard rate? When your citizens are detained for imaginary crimes?" The chamber went quiet. Everyone knew that Vashrak was describing real events. The Courteous had been pushing against human expansion for years, using legal technicalities and bureaucratic harassment to slow humanity's growth in the Orion Spur. The humans had filed formal protests after each incident, requested mediation from the council, and continued to negotiate. They had never once threatened retaliation. "We believe in the rule of law," Linda replied calmly. "Disputes should be settled through proper channels, not through force." Vashrak rose from his platform, his tail sweeping behind him. He was enormous, nearly 10 feet of scaled muscle and barely contained violence. "The rule of law," he said, "is written by the strong. The weak simply obey. That is the way of things. That is how it has always been." He turned to address the full council. "Look at them. These humans. They have been in space for barely 2 centuries. They have no great fleet. They have no warrior tradition. They smile and bow and ask for patience, because they have no other choice." Several delegates nodded. The logic seemed sound. Humanity had appeared suddenly, spreading from their single world with surprising speed, but showing no signs of military strength. They traded. They explored. They built colonies. But they did not fight. Linda Morrison waited until Vashrak finished speaking. Then she stepped forward, still wearing that pleasant diplomatic expression. "Representative Vashrak is correct that humanity prefers peace to war. We believe that civilization advances through cooperation, not conquest." She paused. "But I wonder if the representative might be interested in some human history." Vashrak made a dismissive gesture. "Human history is short and unimportant." "Perhaps, but it is also very educational." Linda's smile remained, but something in her eyes shifted slightly. "Humans have a saying, 'Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it.' We have not forgotten our history, Representative. We remember it very clearly. That is why we choose peace." Commander Sullivan, standing behind the ambassador, noticed something that none of the alien delegates could have recognized. Linda's hands, hidden from view by the podium, had curled into fists. Her shoulders had tensed slightly. These were small changes, invisible to anyone who did not know human body language intimately. Sullivan had served with Linda Morrison for 15 years. He had seen her negotiate with terrorists, calm angry crowds, and talk down suicide bombers. He had never seen her show any sign of losing her composure. Until now. But the moment passed. Linda relaxed her hands, let out a slow breath, and turned back to the council with her usual pleasant demeanor. "The United Earth Coalition will continue to pursue peaceful resolution to all disputes with the Courteous Dominion. We thank the council for their time and attention." She stepped away from the podium and walked toward the exit. Her security detail, following close behind, High Arbiter Zilthek, watched her go, his ancient mind turning over the brief exchange. There had been something there, something beneath the surface of human politeness. He had lived long enough to recognize danger when he saw it, even when it was well hidden. But the moment was gone, and there were other matters to discuss. The council moved on to the next item on the agenda, and the humans were temporarily forgotten. None of them knew that in 3 short weeks they would see what lay beneath humanity's courteous mask. None of them were prepared for what they would find. New Cascadia was a beautiful world. It orbited a yellow star, much like Earth's sun, and its surface was covered with vast forests of purple leaf trees that the first colonists had found both strange and wonderful. Rivers of crystal-clear water flowed through valleys filled with alien flowers. The sky was a deeper blue than Earth's, and the sunsets painted the clouds in shades of orange and pink that took your breath away. 800,000 humans called New Cascadia home. They had built cities along the coasts, farms in the fertile valleys, and small towns in the mountain regions. Children played in parks designed to look like the forests of old Earth. Families gathered for meals in restaurants, serving food from a dozen different human cultures. It was a peaceful place, a hopeful place, a world that represented everything humanity wanted to become. Among the stars, the Karathi fleet arrived without warning on a quiet Tuesday morning. 12 warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons already charging. The colony's defense grid, designed more for asteroid deflection than military combat, barely had time to activate before the first shots were fired. Maria Santos was a schoolteacher in the coastal city of Newport. She was in the middle of explaining basic mathematics to her class of 7-year-olds. When the first explosion shook the building, the children screamed. Maria grabbed as many of them as she could and ran for the emergency shelter beneath the school. She made it to the shelter door just as the second wave of bombardment began. The last thing she saw was a wall of fire rushing toward her. The last thing she heard was the crying of her students. Maria Santos died trying to protect 23 children. None of them survived. Across New Cascadia, similar scenes played out. The Courteous were not targeting military installations. They were targeting civilian infrastructure. Power plants exploded, plunging cities into darkness. Hospitals collapsed, burying patients and staff alike. Communication towers fell, cutting off any chance of coordinated resistance. Within the first hour, 17,000 humans were dead. The news reached Earth 6 hours later, carried by an emergency transmission that had somehow escaped the Courteous jamming field. Admiral Samuel Wright was in his office at Fleet Command when his aide burst through the door. Face white with shock, Wright read the preliminary reports in silence. His hands did not shake. His expression did not change. But somewhere deep inside him, something very old and very dangerous began to wake up. He reached for his secure communication device and opened a Channel 2 Ambassador Morrison on Nexus. Prime. Linda was in her quarters when the call came through. She'd been reviewing documents for an upcoming trade negotiation, drinking tea, and thinking about her sister Nancy, who lived on New Cascadia with her 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie. Linda had been planning to visit them next month for Sophie's birthday. She answered the call and saw Admiral Wright's face on the screen. She knew immediately that something terrible had happened. Wright was not a man who showed emotion easily, but there was something in his eyes that she had never seen before. Ambassador Wright said, his voice carefully controlled. "I need to inform you of a situation." Linda listened as he described the attack. The Courteous fleet, the civilian targets, the casualty numbers. She listened as he explained that the Morrison family shelter in Newport had been hit directly by a plasma bombardment. "Nancy?" Linda asked, though she already knew the answer. "No survivors in that shelter, ma'am. I'm sorry." Linda sat very still for a long moment. The teacup in her hand had gone cold. Through the window of her quarters, she could see the alien cityscape of Nexus Prime. All those strange buildings filled with species who had spent 30 years treating humanity like foolish children. Nancy had been 4 years younger than Linda. She had been the adventurous one, the one who had wanted to see the stars up close. She had moved to New Cascadia because she wanted her daughters to grow up on a frontier world. To be part of building something new, Emma had been 9 years old. She had wanted to be a doctor when she grew up. Sophie had been about to turn 7. Her favorite color was purple, like the leaves of New Cascadia's trees. "Ambassador." Wright's voice came through the communicator. "What are your orders?" Linda looked at the screen. Her face had changed. The diplomatic warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and hard and ancient. It was a look that humans had worn on battlefields throughout their bloody history. From the plains of Troy to the trenches of the Somme, to the ruins of cities whose names were now synonymous with horror. "Admiral," she said, her voice flat and empty. "Activate Contingency Protocol 17. Authorization Code Prometheus Unbound." There was a pause. When Wright spoke again, there was something almost like satisfaction in his voice. "Confirmed, Ambassador. Protocol 17 is now active. How long until our assets are in position?" "The fleet has been on standby for 3 years, ma'am. We can have full coverage of Courteous space within 11 days. Do it." "And Admiral?" Linda paused. "Make sure they don't see us coming." After ending the call, Linda sat alone in her quarters for a long time. She thought about her sister's laugh, about Emma's serious questions about how the human body worked, about Sophie's drawings of purple trees and blue skies. Then she stood up, walked to her closet, and began to select her outfit for the next council session. She would need to look her best. She wanted the other species to remember exactly what she looked like when humanity stopped being polite. Across human space, the message spread through military channels that had been silent for decades. Ships that had been listed as decommissioned powered up their engines. Weapon systems that had supposedly been dismantled began their activation sequences. Soldiers who had been assigned to training duties opened sealed orders and found real mission parameters. The Courteous thought they understood humanity. They thought 30 years of smiles and negotiations meant that the humans were weak, soft, unable to fight. They had made a terrible mistake. The humans had not been weak. They had been waiting, hoping that they would never have to show the galaxy what they truly were, praying that their polite mask would be enough. But the mask was coming off now, and the galaxy was about to meet the real humanity. The species that had invented total war. The species that had split the atom and used it to destroy cities. The species that had spent its entire history fighting, killing and perfecting the art of violence against its own kind. The species that had worked so hard to become civilized precisely because they knew what they were capable of when they weren't. Courteous had killed 17,000 humans. They were about to learn why that was the worst decision their species had ever made. The council chamber was more crowded than it had been in centuries. Word had spread that the humans had requested an emergency session following what the Courteous were calling a border security action on New Cascadia. Every species with a seat on the council had sent representatives. Observers from dozens of non-member civilizations filled the gallery sections. News drones from across the galaxy hovered near the ceiling, broadcasting the proceedings to trillions of viewers. Everyone expected the same thing. Another display of human weakness. The soft creatures would cry and beg and ask the council to intervene. They would file formal protests and request sanctions that would never be enforced. They would be reasonable and civilized and utterly helpless. The Courteous delegation sat in their usual place, making no effort to hide their satisfaction. Vashrak had been promoted to fleet commander after the successful operation on New Cascadia. His new rank insignia gleamed on his scaled chest. He had brought extra guards, not because he expected trouble, but because he wanted witnesses to his triumph. High Arbiter Zilthik called the session to order precisely on time. The ancient Veth was troubled by what had happened, but he had seen border conflicts before. These things were regrettable but common. The galaxy was a hard place, and species that could not protect themselves often suffered for it. Ambassador Morrison of the United Earth Coalition has requested this emergency session, Zilthik announced. Ambassador, you have the floor. Every eye in the chamber turned toward the human entrance. What they saw made many of them freeze. Linda Morrison walked into the chamber, but she was not the same woman they had seen for 30 years. Her silver diplomatic uniform had been replaced by something darker. A black formal suit with no decoration except a small flag of Earth over her heart. Her face was composed but utterly cold, showing no trace of her usual pleasant smile. Behind her came not 2 guards, but 12. They wore combat armor, black and angular, with weapons openly displayed on their hips. They moved with the smooth coordination of soldiers who had trained together for years, spreading out to cover the exits as their ambassador approached the speaking platform. The chamber erupted in protest. Weapons were strictly forbidden in the council hall. Armed guards in such numbers violated every diplomatic protocol. Ambassador Morrison, Zilthek said, his voice carrying over the noise. This display is unprecedented and inappropriate. You will order your guards to surrender their weapons immediately. Linda reached the platform and stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the assembled species. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but the chamber's acoustic systems carried it to every corner of the vast space. No. The single word fell like a stone into still water. The protests died away, replaced by confused silence. 30 years ago, Linda continued, humanity entered this council as the newest spacefaring species in the known galaxy. We were told that the council operated on principles of mutual respect and peaceful coexistence. We were told that disputes would be settled through negotiation and law. We were told that civilized species did not attack each other without cause. She paused, letting her words sink in. We believed you. We believed that if we were patient and reasonable and kind, we would be treated the same way. For 30 years, we smiled while the Veth demanded our technology. We negotiated while the Courteous harassed our ships and citizens. We filed protests while species half our size mocked us as weak and cowardly. Her voice grew colder with each sentence. 3 weeks ago, the Courteous attacked our colony world of New Cascadia. They killed 17,000 of our people. They targeted hospitals, schools, family shelters. Linda's hands gripped the edge of the podium. They killed children, council members. They killed my sister. They killed my nieces. Voshrak rose from his seat, his translator hissing as he spoke. New Cascadia sits in disputed space. The humans refused to withdraw despite legal challenges. Military action was necessary to resolve the dispute. This is the way of the galaxy. The strong take what they wish. The weak accept what they must. Linda turned to face the Karathi commander. The look in her eyes made several nearby delegates step backward, as she said. The strong take what they wish. Thank you for reminding us of that lesson, Commander Voshrak. Humanity had forgotten it for a while. We were trying to be better than our history. We were trying to be civilized. She turned back to the full council. But you see, there is something that this council does not understand. ND about humanity. Our politeness was not weakness. Our patience was not inability. We chose to be kind. We chose to negotiate. We chose to smile and bow and file protests instead of doing what comes naturally to our species. The main display screen behind her flickered to life, showing Admiral right on the bridge of a massive warship. His uniform was not diplomatic gray but military black, and his expression matched Ambassador Morrison's perfectly. Admiral, Linda said without turning, please show the council our current fleet positions. Wright nodded, and the display shifted to a tactical map of Karathi. Space, the chamber fell absolutely silent. 147. One warship surrounded the Courteous homeworld in a perfect sphere. Their weapons were armed and targeted. Additional fleet elements had taken positions around every major Karathi colony and military installation. The entire Karathi civilization was completely encircled. Impossible, Voshrak whispered, his translator barely picking up the word. Our sensors detected nothing. Our scouts reported the human fleet was at Earth. Those were training vessels, Linda replied. Decoys we have been showing you for years, while our real fleet waited. We have been in position around your homeworld for 11 days, Commander. You never saw us because we did not want you to see us. She stepped down from the platform and walked toward the Courteous delegation. The armed guards moved with her, their hands resting on their weapons. Your species has existed for 4 million years, Linda said, stopping just a few feet from Voshrak. In that time, you have conquered hundreds of worlds. You have killed billions of sentient beings. You believe that violence is the natural order of things, that the strong rule and the weak die. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Humanity has existed for 300,000 years. In that time, we have killed more of our own kind than every war in your entire history combined. We invented weapons that can destroy planets. We created poisons that can kill every living thing on a world. We perfected the art of death so thoroughly that we nearly wiped ourselves out a dozen times. Linda straightened up, her eyes never leaving Voshrak's face. We came to the stars hoping to leave that behind. We were polite because we were trying not to be what we are. But you have reminded us, Commander. You have shown us that the galaxy does not reward kindness. She turned and walked back toward the platform, her guards falling into formation around her. So now humanity will stop being polite, and you will learn why we tried so hard to be civilized in the first place. The chamber was absolutely silent. Every delegate, every observer, every news drone focused on the small human woman standing alone against the collected power of galactic civilization. "We have demands," Linda said. "You will hear them now." Commander Gregory Wells sat in the captain's chair of the destroyer Nightfall, watching the tactical display with calm professional interest. Around him, his bridge crew worked in focused silence, each officer handling their station with the precision that came from years of training and simulation. The Karathi fleet above New Cascadia had not moved since the human ships appeared. 27 warships hung in orbit around the occupied colony, their weapons charged and their shields raised. They had been confident enough to conquer a nearly defenseless world. Now they faced something very different. "Status report," Wells said quietly. "All ships report ready," his executive officer replied. "Fleet is in position. Admiral Wright has authorized engagement." Wells nodded. He thought about the 17,000 humans who had died on the world below. He thought about the children who had been burned alive in their schools. He thought about the hospitals that had collapsed on top of patients too sick to run. Then he stopped thinking about it. Emotion had no place in what was about to happen. What came next required cold precision, not hot anger. "Signal the fleet," Wells said. "Execute attack pattern, Omega-3. Weapons free on my mark." The Nightfall surged forward, its engines burning at maximum power. Around it, 42 other human warships moved in perfect coordination, each vessel finding its place in a formation that had been designed and refined over generations of human conflict. The Karathi commander reacted quickly, ordering his fleet into a defensive formation that had won battles across 1,000 years of galactic warfare. It was a good formation, proven and reliable. It was also completely wrong for this situation. "The repositioning," Wells' tactical officer reported. "Standard Karathi defense pattern." "Of course they are," Wells said. "It's the only pattern they know." The human fleet did not charge directly at the Karathi formation. Instead, the ships split into smaller groups, each taking a different angle of approach. They moved through spaces that the Karathi formation left undefended, exploiting blind spots that the reptilian species had never known existed in their own tactics. The first Karathi ship to fall was a heavy cruiser on the formation's left flank. 3 human destroyers appeared from behind a moon that the Karathi sensors had somehow failed to detect them behind. They fired simultaneously, their plasma cannons striking the exact same point on the cruiser's shields. The shields, designed to handle distributed damage across their entire surface, collapsed under the focused assault. The destroyers followed up with precision strikes on the cruiser's engine systems, leaving the great ship dead in space but still intact. "Target disabled," the tactical officer announced. "No significant casualties among enemy crew." Wells nodded. That was the order. Disable, do not destroy. Cripple, do not kill. The humans were not here to slaughter the Karathi. They were here to prove a point. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships appeared from unexpected angles, fired coordinated strikes at specific systems, and disappeared before the Karathi could respond. Communication arrays were destroyed, preventing the enemy ships from coordinating. Engine systems were targeted, leaving vessels stranded. Weapon batteries were neutralized with surgical precision. In the council chamber on Nexus Prime, the assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as the real-time footage played across the main display. Ambassador Morrison stood at the speaking platform, her face expressionless as she watched her species demonstrate exactly what they had been hiding for 30 years. "The Karathi use a defensive formation developed by their ancient warriors," Linda explained, her voice calm and educational. "It is designed to create overlapping fields of fire and mutual support between vessels. It has proven effective against every enemy the Karathi have faced." On the screen, another Karathi cruiser went dark as human ships crippled its systems. "The formation has 3 significant blind spots," Linda continued. "One at 47 degrees below the horizontal plane, one at 123 degrees on the port quarter, and one directly behind the command vessel. Human tactical analysts identified these weaknesses within 6 months of first contact with the Karathi. We have spent the past 30 years developing attack patterns specifically designed to exploit them." Voshruk stared at the screen, his artificial eye worry as it tried to track the impossibly fast human ships. "You have been preparing for this for 30 years, he said, his voice hollow. While you smiled and negotiated, we hoped we would never have to use it, Linda replied. We really did. But we never stopped preparing for the possibility that we would. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. When it was over, every Corathi vessel above New Cascadia was dead in space. Life support systems continued to function on all of them. Emergency beacons broadcast distress signals, but engines, weapons, shields, and communications were completely destroyed. 27 warships, the pride of the Corathi military, had been neutralized without a single enemy fatality. The human ships began to move into formation around the disabled Corathi fleet. Boarding shuttles launched from carrier vessels, each carrying teams of Marines in full combat gear. We will be taking the Corathi crews into custody, Linda announced to the council. They will be treated humanely and according to all galactic conventions on prisoners of war. When the current situation is resolved, they will be returned to their families. High Arbiter, Zilthik found his voice. Ambassador Morrison, this is unprecedented. The council demands an explanation for this. Action. Linda turned to face the ancient Veth. Council had 12,000 years to build a system where species like the Corathi could not murder civilians without consequence. You failed. So now humanity will provide the consequence. She gestured to the tactical display, which now showed the Corathi homeworld surrounded by human warships. We have demands. First, complete withdrawal of all Corathi forces from New Cascadia and its surrounding systems. Second, full financial reparations for all casualties and damages to be determined by a neutral arbitration panel. Third, surrender of every military commander involved in the attack to face justice under human law. Fourth, a formal acknowledgement from this council that humanity's courteous behavior was a choice we made, not a limitation we suffered. Vashrak slammed his tail against his platform. You cannot dictate terms to a sovereign species. The council will not allow this aggression to stand. Linda smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a pleasant expression. The council allowed your aggression against our civilians. The council watched while you murdered 17,000 people, including children. The council did nothing. Her voice hardened. Now the council will watch while we respond. And if any member of this council attempts to interfere with our response, they will discover that we have prepared contingencies for them as well. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate understood the implication. If the humans had been watching and planning against the Corathi for 30 years, they had been watching and planning against everyone. You have 48 hours to accept our terms, Linda said. After that, we will begin removing Corathi military capability permanently. Not just above New Cascadia, everywhere. She turned and walked toward the exit, her guards falling into formation around her. At the door, she paused and looked back at the stunned assembly. We tried being nice, she said. Remember that. Whatever happens next, remember that humanity tried to be civilized. You taught us that civilization was weakness. Now you will see what we are when we are not being civilized. She walked out, and the doors closed behind her in the chamber. No one spoke for a very long time. 6 months had passed since. The galaxy changed forever. The Corathi had accepted every human, demand within 36 hours of Ambassador Morrison's ultimatum. Their fleet commanders, including Vashrak himself, had been surrendered to human custody and transported to New Cascadia to face trial for crimes against humanity. The reparations payments had begun, enormous sums that would take the Corathi economy decades to fully pay. Their military had been reduced to a purely defensive force, forbidden from operating outside their own territory. But the true change was not in treaties or payments or restrictions. The true change was in how the galaxy looked at humanity. Ambassador Morrison had returned to her diplomatic duties after the crisis ended. She still wore her silver uniform. She still spoke politely to the other delegates. She still smiled her pleasant diplomatic smile. But nothing was the same. When Linda walked into a meeting, conversations stopped. When she made a request, it was granted immediately. When she expressed concern about a proposal, That proposal was quietly withdrawn without debate. The other species had learned something about humanity that they could not unlearn. It colored every interaction. The Veth Dominion had dropped all demands for human terraforming technology. They had also offered a significant trade agreement, with terms so favorable that human economists had been genuinely confused, until they realized it was essentially a peace, offering the smaller aggressive species that had harassed human ships and colonists for years had suddenly become very friendly. Human merchants found that their goods were welcomed everywhere. Their prices were accepted without negotiation, and their complaints were addressed with remarkable speed. High Arbiter Zilthik requested a private meeting with Ambassador Morrison exactly 180 days after the incident. They met in a garden that the Veth maintained near the council chamber, a peaceful space filled with plants from Zilthik's homeworld. The ancient insectoid had arranged for human-style seating and even human tea, served in cups that were slightly too large for human hands, but clearly made with careful attention to human preferences. "I wanted to thank you for agreeing to see me," Zilthik said, his translator rendering his clicking speech into smooth galactic standard. "I know that humanity has little reason to trust the council or its members." Linda accepted a cup of tea and took a sip. It was surprisingly good, though the temperature was slightly wrong. "You have led the council for 300 years, Arbiter. I assume you did not invite me here just to serve tea." "No." Zilthak settled onto his resting frame, his multiple legs folding beneath him. "I have a question that has troubled me since the incident. I suspect I know the answer, but I need to hear it from you." "Ask." "For 30 years, humanity endured insults and provocations that would have driven most species to war. You had the power to respond at any time. Your fleet was ready. Your plans were made." Zilthik's antennae twitched with curiosity. "Why did you wait? Why did you let yourselves be treated so badly for so long?" Linda looked out over the alien garden, watching strange flowers bloom under artificial light. She thought about her sister Nancy, about Emma and Sophie, about the 17,000 people who had died because humanity had tried to be better than its nature. "'Cause we hoped we would never have to," she said finally. "Because every time humanity has let itself become what it truly can be, the cost has been terrible. Not just for our enemies. For us. For who we want to be." She set down her teacup and turned to face the ancient Arbiter directly. "Humans have a very bloody history, Arbiter. We have spent most of our existence killing each other. We invented weapons that can destroy entire cities in a single flash. We created poisons that can kill every living thing on a planet. We developed tactics and strategies for mass death that are so efficient they frightened us into trying to become something else. Something civilized," Zilthik said. "Yes, when we reached the stars. We hoped that we could leave our violent past behind. We hoped that if we were patient and kind and reasonable, we could become the peaceful species we wanted to be." Linda's voice softened. "We were not pretending to be weak. We were trying not to be strong. There is a difference." Zilthik considered this for a long moment. "And now? Will humanity return to its courteous mode, as you called it?" "We will try." Linda picked up her tea again. "We always try. That is what makes us human. We know what we are capable of, and we choose every day to be something better." She paused. "But I think the galaxy has learned an important lesson, which is, when humans are being polite, be grateful, because the alternative is something none of us want to see." Zilthik made a sound that his translator rendered as a sigh. "I've led this council for 300 years. I have seen species rise and fall. I have witnessed wars that killed trillions. I thought I understood power and violence and the nature of dangerous beings." He looked at the human woman sitting across from him, so small and soft compared to his armored frame. "I was wrong. Humanity is the most dangerous species I have ever encountered. Not because of your weapons or your tactics, though those are frightening enough. You are dangerous because you understand exactly what you are, and you still choose to be kind. That requires a strength I do not think any other species possesses." Linda smiled, and for the first time in months it was a genuine expression. "Thank you, Arbiter. That may be the nicest thing anyone has ever said about humanity." It was not meant as a compliment. It was meant as an acknowledgement of truth. Zilthik rose from his resting frame. The Council will not forget what happened. Neither will any other species in the galaxy. For better or worse, humanity has revealed itself. I know. Linda stood as well. We will try to be worthy of your fear. We will try to use our strength wisely, and only when necessary. We will try to be the civilized species we want to be. If someone else makes the mistake that Courteous made. Linda's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. Then they will learn the same lesson. Quickly and thoroughly. She extended her hand in the human gesture of respect and farewell. Zilthik reached out with one of his smaller limbs and took it carefully. Goodbye, Arbiter. Thank you for the tea. Goodbye, Ambassador. Thank you for the education. Linda walked out of the garden and back into the gleaming corridors of Nexus Prime. Around her, aliens of 100 different species moved aside to let her pass. Some bowed their heads. Others simply stepped back, creating a clear path for the small human woman in the silver uniform. She smiled at them as she passed. That same pleasant diplomatic smile she had worn for 30 years, but now everyone understood what lay behind that smile. Now everyone knew that human courtesy was a gift, not a guarantee, and the galaxy would never make the mistake of forgetting it again in the years that followed. Scholars would call this period the Great Rebalancing. Humanity took its place among the elder races, not as newcomers to be tested, but as equals to be respected. The Council reformed its policies on military aggression. New treaties protected civilian populations. Smaller species found champions in humanity, who never forgot what it felt like to be underestimated. And throughout it all, the humans remained polite. They smiled. They negotiated. They filed formal protests and requested mediation, but everyone remembered New Cascadia. Everyone remembered the Karathi fleet hanging dead in space. Everyone remembered Ambassador Morrison standing alone against the collected power of galactic civilization. Speaking quietly about humanity's bloody history, they remembered, and they were careful. And humanity continued, trying to be better than its nature, one courteous day at a time.